What's up, sleepyheads? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Sleepy Aliens Perspective. I am your host, Leigh, and we're going to just veer off course, and I'm just going to embrace today. And I want to talk about why you put your partner on a pedestal. Yeah, so we're going to deep dive into this. And, this isn't a relationship bashing or anything like that. Like, this is really just kind of evaluating why you may put your partner before yourself, and if you've been in that circumstance, how that's impacted you and what kind of impact it has on you and how it may be affecting your relationships. And of course, I say this acknowledging that I am not a relationship expert, but I have mastered singlehood. I've literally been single for a majority of my teens and 20s, and I've dated all through that time period, and I've dated everything from like an athlete to a river guide. Like, I've dated all sorts of different guys, and I've had short relationship experiences, but highly impactful to the point where it's really allowed me to see my behavioral cycles that I repeated, I don't know, if you don't know by now, I'm clearly very intentional. And when it comes to the mistakes that I make, I'm very aware of okay, I see that I'm doing that. Like, how can I fix that? How can I fix this? Or I have this problem, that keeps repeating. Let me backtrack and see what behaviors I'm repeating, right? So I have that awareness, and it allows me to evaluate things from a different perspective. So even when I was having all of those dating experiences back then, I kind of knew that slowly but surely all of my dating experiences were progressing, and I was learning more, and I was setting boundaries, saying what I needed, each experiences I was doing more of that, and those behaviors were growing, and and I was getting better at not repeating those old patterns or responding to things in toxic emotional ways, and I want to say too that, we all have history and trauma that wires us a certain way when it comes to how we perceive love and what we think about love. And I don't think people hear this enough, but it's okay if, you have to learn from a base point of, damn, that's shitty. It's okay if your base point is really low and you work your way up from there. I think it just says more about how much you've grown in your ability to learn and do better for yourself and that progression. So I think that's important. But yeah, so I'm not a relationship expert, but I have a lot of wisdom. I have my psychic abilities. I have my intuition. And of course, I've learned from my own history. I learned from my mother's history, my aunts, my friends. I really learned from my environment, and I have that awareness because, everybody that's around you is there for a reason. And if you're there to support a friend through a traumatic experience, it gives you a chance to also learn from that trauma without having to experience, that trauma itself. Need some water. And also I want to say that I only really will be talking about the things that I've healed in myself or what I've learned. I don't want to ever come on here and put on a front, Yeah. I also want to say that in terms of, me having and focusing on like my awareness and what I learned in my relationship history, I also went to therapy through my teens and like 20s. I also studied my attachment style, and I studied different topics surrounding like love and intimacy. Like, I've really read about these things because, I'm that single person who's so intentional. Like, the next relationship I have, like, I want it to be like a committed relationship, and I want to open myself up to higher levels of intimacy, even though that's terrifying and not my immediate nature, not even in my generational nature. But I say that because these are also things that I've got done in conjunction with like just my own journaling and thought process surrounding my relationships. And I want to say that because it's important, because you do need, counselors are great for helping you understand different dynamics of relationships, just because, they've studied that stuff more, of course, but they've seen so many other dynamics of it in their profession. So they really do have that expertise, and, you may think something is really like, I don't know, just like weird or out there, but in a relationship dynamic, but then when you run it by your counselor, you find out that it's extremely common, so it just helps you normalize a lot of things you wouldn't normally. But as you, let's see, I may have got my cards mixed up, but the main focus is why we put partners on a pedestal. And number one, of course, overgiving. And we overgive because we have events in our childhood in which love was a bit more conditional, and we had to give more of our energy to receive what should have been more balanced. So in general, you grew up not having like a balance in the love you were given and the love you gave and the love you received, so you grew up without it, and it normalizes it. So you subconsciously continue to attract partners who, don't have that balance of giving and receiving. But once you gain clarity about the love you received being conditioned and why it was conditioned, the emotional response of your parents and where they got that from, just connecting all of those dots, it kind of brings it back full circle, and you don't have this complex of anger and sadness surrounding the issue, but you understand that that was your initial learning response, and now you're rewiring your brain to respond to that differently. So that's something to keep in mind. But also, how do you heal overgiving? You learn to give to yourself, and it's sad to think about that child version of yourself that learned to give so much to yourself that you got to the point where you felt like you didn't need things from others, and so you weren't able to receive as well. So that's another aspect. But yeah, how do you heal yourself? How do you give to yourself? And that's by balancing yourself. That's by nurturing yourself and spoiling yourself. Like, decide how you want to be treated and spoiled, and like, how do you love on yourself? Is it by like keeping your living space really clean? Is it by like going for a really long walk, or meeting up with a friend? Just whatever it is that gives you that sense of like, okay, I'm being taken care of, my needs are being met, I'm stable in myself, I'm not going to rely on someone else to be stable for me. And that is perhaps the most difficult lesson you learn when you are single, because you're gonna have bouts of like feeling like you want or need somebody. That's completely normal. But if you have more intensive like feelings of like, oh my god, like I need this relationship, like you're not stable yet, because that relationship is gonna hit you and you don't give a shit, and trust me, like, again, these are things that I've healed and I'm healing in myself, and I've only recently, gotten to that space, and it feels really, really liberating. But yeah, so that's just something else to think about. But again, I want to touch on receiving. Like, I am such a doer and a giver of myself. It is hard for me to receive from others. So I am learning now to like make space for it. Like there was this customer that came into the store the other day, and he's a regular and he's nice, and he's not on my creep like radar. He doesn't hit high or anything, but he did offer me an ice cream sandwich, and I didn't even ring him up, and he comes to the side while I'm like bagging for somebody else, and he offers me this sandwich, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna eat it now. I'm like, I'm in the middle of this rush, and he was like, yeah. Also, at first I was like, oh, I can't have gluten. I'm so used to ice cream sandwiches not having gluten, and of course this ice cream sandwich had gluten. But yeah, it was an awkward moment, and I kept rejecting this ice cream sandwich, even though, and I realized this just the other day, I walked by the ice cream area and I looked at those and I was like, I should try those. So the universe literally was trying to let me try that ice cream sandwich, and I rejected it. Yeah. So that's what I mean by making space to receive. But of course I'm at work and I'm very mindful of gifts I receive from men I don't really know, right? So that's also why I rejected that. That's also just smart. But I should feel safe enough to take an ice cream sandwich that has just been unboxed after just being purchased like seconds ago. But yeah, so you know what, before we get to part 2, because of course this is getting really long, I'm going to pause this and we're going to start up on a second part, because like I said, this is getting long and I am being mindful of going really long on videos, because not everybody has the attention span of 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and 50 minutes, and I haven't built that audience yet, even though eventually people will see that I'm amazing, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, she was on YouTube, on Spotify all this time and nobody knew. Like, yeah, I fucking was. Just working really hard, just marketing myself, building something from nothing. That came out almost dark, but that didn't get me. I saged before I did this. But yeah, so let's pick up on, and let's do another part of this. But yeah, part 1, basically recognize the fact that you have to be aware, and you may be overgiving in relationships, and where that comes from in your childhood, and focus on healing that. And there's all sorts of routes, and you have all sort of time to, hopefully you have time to do that. Hopefully you have time to heal that. I don't know, but that was part 1. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for supporting me. Like, share, subscribe, donate, help me create more content. I am your host, Leigh. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.